Well, of course it's good to be home because I've lived in the same place for 25 years, in the hills above Loughallen. So of course it's good to be home. And it makes me appreciate having lived here for that time. Some people would think, have you not moved on? Some people move from one place to another. I've just lived in the one place. And even in terms of nationhood, I've lived just in one nation. I've just lived in Ireland. I haven't lived in other countries for long periods. And I've actually lived along the Erne. So I've lived in Donegal and I've lived in Fermanagh and I've lived in Galway and I've lived in Roscommon, Leitrim. So it's like I've just lived, and I'm from Cavan. I've just lived in an area around the two rivers, the Shannon and the Erne. And some people would think, well, that's a disadvantage, you know. Not only does he know nothing, he has experienced nothing. And that'd be a thing too that could make you feel inferior. You know, I have experienced nothing. How can I talk about sophisticated and modern issues if I haven't lived in New York, if I haven't lived in America or Britain or France or somewhere? I've only lived in one place. And even in Ireland, I haven't, for any huge amount of time, lived in Dublin or any other city. So there's a kind of a sense that you're limited in your experience if you don't have much, and that a wide experience is something that's of enormous value. And I happen to believe that's true. So it's not that I'm a rural chauvinist or celebrating a sense of my own ignorance. When I meet somebody at a dinner party and they're talking about, let's say, politics or, issues about, social things that would be in the media, current events, I always find that people who have been around the world, who've lived in different places, who've had lots of experience, they talk with a great, they're very interesting because of their experience. Now, that could leave me feeling hugely disadvantaged, especially if I was to be defensive and think that I should be celebrating my own ignorance or my own lack of experience. But the one thing that I do have, which gives me great peace and comfort, is that not having experience of the wide world, having experience only of one particular place, it kind of focuses you very deeply in it. And this becomes, for me personally, it's been a real benefit to my sense of being here now, sense of place. I think it was a big thing if you go back to ancient Irish Celtic culture, maybe 5th, 6th century, people had a deep sense that there was an integral relationship between place and spirit. That standing on ground was always standing on sacred ground. You go on a pilgrimage, you stand in a particular place, and it transforms you. And I know that in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, if I was doing a retreat, I'd be asked to go to a room and stay in the room and don't come out of it until the retreat's over. I've had that experience where you might go to a little mobile home, or in my case I was in a room, and the dinner would be left, and the breakfast and the tea, they'd be left at the outside of the door, and the door, get a little knock on the door, and you'd open it and the person would be gone, you'd take in the bit of food and you'd eat it and then you'd put it back out. And that was really, to me, the most powerful part of a retreat in Buddhism, was that you were in the one place. So you built up a kind of a psychic energy in that space. Do you know the way when you're at a dinner table too and you're having a chat with somebody and it's all going well, and then it gets into an argument and you're talking about like something tricky, let's pretend, Brexit, because that's one of the big ones at the moment, or COVID. And it goes on just too long and people get a bit too argumentative and there's an energy grows up at the table and it's uneasy and you don't know how to get rid of it. And the way you get rid of it is somebody says, will we go into the other room here, or will we all sit at the lounge sofa? And you move away, and because you move away physically from the table and you sit around in the sofas, the energy changes. Miraculously, it's like the energy changes. And you can start a different conversation, a bit of fun or something. And that also happens the opposite direction, where you're having a conversation and it's absolutely beautiful. Let's say somebody is telling the romantic story of how they fell in love. It's their anniversary. They're a friend. And they say, did I ever tell you how we met? And everybody, there's 4 or 5, and we're all listening. And on he goes or she goes, and they start telling the beautiful story of how they met, and the whole table begins to ooze a kind of romantic love. It's flowing from one person to the other, and it's just gorgeous. And if the light is going down and there's a few candles lit and there's wine on the table, it's even better. And it's absolutely gorgeous, right? And then some idiot, we say in Cavan, idiot. Some idiot says, do you want coffee? And it breaks the spell. Or somebody says, let's all move in, to the sofa. And of course, you go into the sofa, you can never go back to the conversation because the spell is gone, the beautiful atmosphere is gone. So there's an amazing way where physicality, being physically present, is intrinsically connected with your psychic kind of vibe. Makes total sense that all the different meditation postures in any different tradition are always about at least being still, usually with the back being straight, because it gives you like a kind of an axle or an anchor in reality, in the cosmos. And that's extended in the idea of a Buddhist retreat where you would go for 5 days or 30 days or whatever, but largely the first thing you would do is map out the boundary. Whether it's the boundary of your mobile home or the boundary of your room or the boundary of a garden and a house or whatever it would be, and you'd map out the boundary and you're not going to step across that boundary for as long as the retreat happens. And then your physical rootedness in that space becomes actually part of what generates a deeper consciousness. It's really, really interesting that happens in Buddhism, but it also happens in Christianity. You used to have these people, don't know if you have them now, I'm sure they're somewhere. There's kind of natural ones nowadays. But in Christianity, you had people like Julian of Norwich. They were anchorites. And the anchorite was like an anchor. They would make a commitment, sometimes a public vow, sometimes, formally with the church, that I'm going to spend my life in this room and never leave it. Julian of Norwich did this. There's hundreds and thousands of them over history. And again, it's that sense of being in one space. And when I go over to speak to my precious teacher, the Panchen Utsel Rinpoche, lives in Jampaling in West Cavan. The minute I go in the gate and go up the avenue, I feel the energy changes because I'm in his space. This is his space. And it's also like for a teacher of Buddhism, like a Rinpoche, the space he inhabits is his mandala. It's his kind of external symmetrical expression of balance and order in the cosmos, at which he is the center channeling it. So all the time the sense of space is amazing, how being in one space can unlock energy. And therefore when I think about what I lack, and I do miss the sense of space, travelling from different places, living in different places. I hear of people who live in Berlin, I hear of people who live in Paris, and I think, God, I envy them, They've such a wider experience than me. And they're at the dinner table, and I hear the fruit of their experience, and it's all true. But I don't feel bad in myself because I have found a positive aspect of my limited experience, which is not to celebrate it as ignorance, but actually that it kind of forces me into a singularity. It forces me into a singularity. What have I to say? Nothing. What have I to share as experience? Nothing. I'm just here. I'm just here in this one place. I was here 25 years ago. I was here when the child was a baby. I was here when the child came back as an adult. I was here when the trees were little saplings. Beech trees that are now 30 feet high. I was here when they were little saplings. I'm like a tree. I'm stuck here. I'm going nowhere. And as I get older, I'll go nowhere. I'm just here. I'm just physically the same thing every morning. I look out at the same trees. And there's a kind of a beauty in this. There's a kind of thing to be cherished if you live in this condition. And it may be that in the ecological crisis we're in and the way the world is going, we might need people to spend less time in the air and in airports. Because there's an awful lot of people in the air at any one moment. At any one moment, even at this moment now, even despite COVID, I'd say if you just counted the amount of people who are flying around in the air above Ireland or Europe, it would be phenomenal. So being in one space, it's like I'm not harming the cosmos either. I'm not harming the world. I'm just here like a tree. But being here like a tree has a great sense of awakening in one, a sense of consciousness. There's some way that the landscape in Ireland is critical as a way of externalizing the internal world. It's like a touchstone for the soul. It's like if the soul is disembodied as it is, it's like your inner subtle self that can never be found, never be touched, never be seen. But in some way the vectors of where it witnesses, what it bears witness to, this tree, this space, every day, more and more every day, that awakens. The one thing all the time. The one single thing, the one space. So that even in your own life, if you want to kind of create, let's say, a shrine or a meditation space or whatever, it's very good to have one space, one shrine, one altar, one thing, and have nothing else there but it. Never duplicate and use that particular little table for something else. Just use that table for your water bowls or for your icon or whatever. And make it like the anchor in the whole cosmos. That's the one reality that your soul touches. And it becomes a portal, it becomes a way to connect with more subtle energy inside you. Being here now has a timeline. If the here is consistent. I think that's why people like going to favourite places. You know, people, you might have a moment by the ocean, you might have a particular tree in St. Anne's Park, you might have a little corner of Lough Ennel that you go to, and it's like you love going to that same space. You love going to that same space, and it's a beautiful feeling. You bring your worries to it, you bring your cares to it. It becomes your sacred space. You can get spaces like that in childhood. You know, sometimes a child will find spaces. I used to find spaces, let's say in Killikeen in Cavan, beside the lake, and there was one or two places that I would go to if I was unhappy or lonely or afraid or sad. And there's places I'd go where I could feel like I was praying. I could feel like that God was listening to me. And there were very beautiful moments of space. I'd go to the space. And I would see the sun set in the same way and the grey of the lake. And if 40 years later I went back to those spaces, they would energise me in the same way. At the click of my fingers, I walk back into that and it's wow. These spaces are so extraordinary in opening up my sense of the sacred. My soul rests in this space. My soul rests here. Do you have some place like that? It's at different levels. You can have it in your house like a shrine. You can have it in a place you go to. Or you can have it in the very place you live. It's different levels of the space to be here. And being here in one space is actually being everywhere because the cosmos is in being. The whole universe, or how many there are, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But whatever there is, whatever we're belonging to in this big cosmos spinning around, it's equally here as it is on the moon. So if there is being everywhere, then in this place it is being. It is the same being. It is being. I stand here and look up into the cosmos. I am in the cosmos. This is my corner of the cosmos. It's not isolated. So I'm everywhere. If I'm here. I think the most important, not the most important, one of the most valuable times for prayer in Tibetan Buddhism would be as the light turns from darkness to light or from light to darkness. We get a really long stretch of this in Ireland called twilight, and it's really a powerful time because there's a transformation twice a day. This transformation where all the light goes out and we are in the dark. And then 12 hours later or whatever, we're in the dark and this transformation comes and we begin to grow into the light. Now these are wonderful moments twice a day. The most easy to facilitate a sense of mentor deities in our landscapes, mindfulness, as the whole cosmos turns, but turns around a particular axis, turns around a particular focal point, and that focal point is where you are, being here now in a particular place. In a particular place. Here. And then, of course, when you get to ideas like that enlightenment is already happening, this is a really powerful contradiction. You know, enlightenment, you are already enlightened. Well, you're not I'm not enlightened, but I am enlightened. Some depth of being within me is already completely pure light. How do I hold that without it becoming a kind of an idea in my head, a soliptic nonsense? And the answer is, be here now. So that substantial reality all around me is not quite the truth. Nor is it the truth that everything around me is illusion. Because as long as I keep my eyes open, my feet in the ground, and I know I'm here in the substantial world, and yet in my heart I know that beyond the dark glass there is within me pure light. It's what Jesus said. He was saying the same thing as the Buddha, just saying, awaken. Kingdom of heaven. Don't be waiting for the future. Don't be waiting for it to be somewhere else. It's here and it's now. It is here and it is now. And holding on to the space you're in. Holding one space, one little corner, one little table, one little field of the mountain as sacred to you becomes a portal, becomes a place where you feel that heaven, you feel that kingdom of God. shimmering in your heart. I am so grateful for you being here, and thank you. I'll talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.